Hey folks, last time I accidentally hit the wrong mic, so we're going to try and get a little bit of a recap of some of the last stuff. Levels were off. We got that fixed this time round, so hopefully we'll have that going. Um, and we covered a lot of ground in the last one. It was a bit much for a single broadcast, so we'll cover some of it and make sure we mix it up into some of the other broadcasts and just single it out a little bit more so the videos have good names. Long story short, I'm working on upgrading and modernizing my web development skills. I've been on a long hiatus focused on machine learning and connected devices. Paradigms are totally different. Time to circle back to web dev. So we're going to do a fair amount of web dev learning. I'm a principal engineer, and we'll see how that goes. And hopefully y'all can learn along with me. Quick aside before we get rolling. Thought this was kind of neat. I've been on Windows for ever, forever, and I switched to Mac. Been on the Mac for about 2 weeks. Like a lot of things about it, a lot of things I don't like, but overall it's working pretty well. I think I like that switch, so we'll kind of stick with that. I got both now. So anyways, moving on, we're going to focus on ReactJS development. So this has been what I decided to go with for the web development skills, specifically for the UI. You got the back end stuff, but the UI, that's a trick. I work for a large company focused on cloud, so you don't get a lot of time actually focused on UI, and I figured this year is going to be the year of user interfaces. So I did a lot of study to try and sort out which framework to use, and well, for better or worse, I've decided on ReactJS. I'll have to solve some of the major flaws, and that's a whole nother broadcast all in of itself. So with that, I'm going to be building and have started building several repos. So, I got a GitHub. It's this github.com/drcrook1. And there are 2 repos so far. In total, there will be 3. The first one is this Facility Sense backend. This is going to be an ASP.NET Core application backed by a SQL server. And then we have this Facility Sense React Administrator application. This is a regular web interface. I'm going to use this as a starting point for all of my future apps. So it's really nice to have just like something you can copy paste and just use for a lot of stuff. It has all the basic framework in there. It's got all the injection stuff in there. And, it takes a long time to just get that all written out. So that's what this is going to be. It'll be for me. I open sourced it. Should be public. Y'all can go use it too. It's going to have basic create, read, update, delete functionality for the data types, so facilities, ratings, and users. I am going to add advanced authentication to it. Reason for advanced authentication is I got to do a lot of advanced authentication authorization stuff. So B2B, B2C, Azure Active Directory, like that's all going to be ingrained in there, along with all on OAuth. And a decent user interface established, something that has all the CSS, et cetera, done. So that's kind of the goal. Those are up there. You can go check them out. They're a great starting point even now. So let's talk about what has been going on the last couple weeks. So I've been working on this for a couple weeks, and every week you learn a new lesson. So let's go through some of the lessons we learned this week. The big lessons I learned this week was .env files for ReactJS. They don't talk about them in the tutorials. It really makes me mad because, in Python, env files, they're all over the place. You're using those, you're Dockerizing, and great thing to have. And, I was trying to figure out how configuration worked in React. And, after a lot of digging, I discovered they got .env files too. So they really, you got to start with those. Those are really great. Other big thing is the functional paradigm, not the class-based paradigm. The docs kind of get you started in functional, then move you to class. But really, as you get further in the docs, they start talking about the advanced features need functional. So you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot going with the class. So I really wish that the docs had kind of stuck and been consistent with the functional approach. The last couple things here are lessons I really learned a lot more this week. really focusing on thinking about things in a hierarchy, like a tree. Like I've got a top thing and it's made up of these four things, which are made up of these things, which use these other things. And thinking about that in conjunction with the concept of code reuse, um, it's a very helpful thing because that's how React really likes to work. Is it's very focused on that componentization, but then you almost end up in a duplicate code all over the place, sprinkled everywhere. So you have to kind of think of, how do I build this component hierarchy while extracting these common things out such that I can place them where they need to go. And thinking about code reuse and the concept of a component hierarchy is a bit of a mental shift. And if you can get into that, you can build better self-contained components, and that'll just make life a little easier. And then the last thing is you probably are going to want to try refactoring 3 to 4 times to establish your pattern. The docs don't really talk about design patterns or code patterns, so I'm kind of figuring those out as I go. So anyways, let's go ahead and check out some code. PowerPoint kind of is just PowerPoint. Who cares about PowerPoint? Let's see code. And actually, before we fully go to code, yeah, this is my GitHub repo. So you'll see Facility Sense backend here, and Facility Sense React admin here. This is the app where it is so far today. So we got a cool nav bar. It expands, it collapses, it got cool little icons that hover over. And the main thing we got here is we got this facilities, and it populates. This is actually coming from our ASP.NET web application backed by SQL Server. You'll see that we have pagination. We have 11. It's showing 1 to 10. Let's go to 25. Hey, look, we added another one. So let's go ahead and add something real quick. So we've got a button. This button, you can add things. So we'll do streaming testing and cool description, right? So let's go ahead and submit this. Watch this. This 11 down here is going to go to 2 immediately. Submit 12, right? And we've got our streaming testing, and it's got some cool description underneath it. That's kind of neat. We've decided we need to change the name of it. We'll go ahead and hit edit. Look, it auto-populates with a cool description. So we'll just call it streaming. Let's delete that part. And let's cool description, some more mods. Hit our submit button. It closes as we expect. Name changes to streaming. Cool description, more mods. Let's go ahead and delete this final test. So I've got a delete button. Hit the delete button. We can confirm the delete. Voila, it's gone, right? Basic. We create, we're reading, we're displaying it in the table. We updated, that was the edit, and we delete. CRUD, right? Lots of CRUD. So let's see, how does this work actually in React, and what's kind of neat about React? Why is everybody all excited about React? So we'll start from the top and focus just on the facility side of the house. I want to try and keep this fairly concise. So we've got a home page. That's actually not even what we wanted. We want the index page. Index page. This is going to show us a lot of why it's important. So index is where all the stuff attaches. So we have our index and we have our index HTML. Index has a root on the HTML page. Index.js is going to attach to root. And we're going to render a side nav with a router in it. So let's go back to our user interface here real quick. This is our nav. It's got the header and it's got this. I called it a side nav. Now the router is what takes us between home, facilities, and whoopsies, that's not something that we got yet. So let's go and take a look just so we get the high level structure. Side nav. So this is a component. Check this out. This is the cool thing about React and why you want to focus on componentization and reuse. So we've got our side nav. It comes from components, navigation, side nav. So I have in my source folder components, I have navigation components, I have a nav, and I have a router in here. So side nav, big complicated thing, but the big part here is we have a main box and this takes content. That content is props.content. Look at this real quick. When we did the index.js, we're passing content. So it's rendering a router, which came from here. We imported the router, matched the router, we passed it a router tag, which has everything associated with it. So this is kind of cool because you can give it these parameters, and these parameters do whatever it wants with it. It can render it, it can be a function, it can be data, lots of stuff, lots of flexibility in that. So what's the router do? The router basically says, hey, if the path is slash, you're going to go to home. If it's slash home, you're going to go to home. If it's slash facilities, you're going to go to facilities. If it's anything else, you're going to go to our not found page. And look, these are coming in from our pages. So pages facility, pages 404, pages home. So this is what it's going to do. It's just simply going to render this in that main content section. So we got top level. This is kind of neat. This took a while to sort out too, but this was like 2 weeks ago I sorted this out. So not content for today to focus on. Content for today is we have gone to the facilities. We have data binding was probably one of the biggest questions. One of my colleagues, we're both kind of, we've buddied up, we've teamed up, and we're like, we're gonna master some UI stuff. So data binding was an interesting one, so we'll talk about that mostly. So we get to facilities. This is after a fair amount of refactoring. So I've elevated things up. My initial goal was to try to have this page be as simple as possible. But when I was refactoring, I went through this mental exercise of trying to think about the component hierarchy and code reuse. One of those things was that a lot of the sub-elements needed to retrieve data to hydrate themselves. So for example, this function, number 10, get facility data, originally that lived inside of the facilities table component, but I needed to be able to re-render and rehydrate that data. So you saw when we clicked the confirm on the create button and we clicked the delete confirm button, right? Like that had the data get rehydrated from the database. So I needed to sprinkle this into more places than I initially suspected. So, one of the big refactors was I needed to bring this up higher so that I could push it down into the 10 different places that needed it. So you'll see that, for example, it is doing a handle reload on my facility modal and a handle reload on my facility table. So I need to reload stuff occasionally, data changes. So that was a big thing is I started realizing that these components needed more information so that I could extract that reuse. Notice this is also a functional version, so that's kind of nice. And I'm using these other components. So high level, the view is quite simple. I have a button. That button opens a modal. This part frustrates me. So other people, if you know ReactJS really well, what frustrates me about this is that I have from my perception, a leak of modal logic, and that modal logic is the create, open, and close, right? Like this is setting this as open or close, and I've had to pass the open state in from the top level. I kind of want to just add my modal and have it, have its own open and close, but the issue was the button. This was component reuse. I'm going to need this create facility modal in a few other places. Like I have plans to add a map, for example. If I want to reuse this create facility modal, I don't want to be tied to this graphic, right? So if I go here, this graphic here of this button, if I bound those up into the same exact component, which I had originally done, so I refactored a couple times. One of the refactors was I separated the button from the modal. When I separated the button from the modal, the state management went to the master page as far as whether this was open or closed. That is no longer self-contained inside of the modal itself. The modal now is just a dumb modal, and it takes its state, and you tell it are you to be open or closed, which, yeah, okay, I suppose that can make sense living inside of this high-level area. But point being, I didn't want to tie this button to the modal. If I go to a map, I might have like a little plus button as like an icon in the map, and I want to have that open the same modal. And you'll see actually this modal has a form in it, and this form is the same form as the edit form, so we're getting code reuse there as well. So those couple of refactors helped allow me to not have to code the same things over and over again. So instead of having two forms that I basically coded, I have one form that I coded, and now when I start sprinkling these edit and create modals around, I only have one, and I can drop them everywhere that I need them and just change the way that I render the button. Super cool. In fact, with the delete button, I've done the same thing. You confirm and you cancel, and you pass it the title and the description and what it does on a confirm. So on a confirm, you pass it that logic. Tell what do you need it to do. In this case, we're telling it that it needs to delete, and that gives me reuse out of my confirmation button. So a lot of logic, but this is nice and clean, you know? So you're focused more on like, how do I compose and arrange and place these things together, as opposed to a lot of the details and trying to sort that out. Man, I had an app before, and it was all just straight knockout HTML5. Like, man, that was when you had to do stuff like this, that was a monster to deal with. So time to modify, update, maintain, I think is going to be a huge benefit here. Anyways, long story short, let's go check out one of these. I think the table's the more interesting one. Oh no, we have to talk about data binding. Data binding's okay. So check this out. We're defining the function here, right? So this is an async function that we've defined. It lives inside of this function, so it's kind of wrapped up in here. And we have this use effect thing. This is what you're going to use to essentially allow the re-render. And after much Google searching, to make it fire off only once, you pass an empty array. I have no idea why. JavaScript magic. Hopefully I figure that out one day, but you pass it an empty array and it fires only once. Before I did this, it was like boom, 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 boom. Every time something got added, dude, this was firing all the time. It was horrible. Now this fires once, and all I did was pass an empty array. So use effect, get facility data goes, makes a query against our backend. Look, we're using the environment variables. So we have our app API backend root, which is localhost 7113/API. Then we're going to append the facilities because we got other things behind that API that we can use. And then I'm going to do some mapping because I haven't added the logic in the backend to do this stuff yet. And we're going to call set facilities. And in our table, you'll see facilities equals facilities. The facilities is the state object. And this is being used in our table to render out all of the cells. So let's go into the table. You'll see here that we have like we've got a table, container, header. Here's the rows, and then the body. This is cool. We're basically going to slice based on page, rows per page, and this is going to give us that pagination. And this is like a virtual pagination, so you need all the data in memory. So this doesn't help you with the real pagination issue. We're going to have to implement that later. So we'll do real pagination now, virtual pagination later. This is virtual pagination. So I'm going to get a number that I'm going to have, and then I'm going to map that to returning another one of these rows. So so this is basically like a for each, right? So for each row in facilities that was passed into me, render a facility row, and here's some parameters that I want you to have. So we have to pass the reload because the edit and the delete buttons are actually wrapped up inside the concept of a facility row. So I wanted to not have this big massive row object that I had to deal with, and I didn't want to embed it in here. So to make it a little prettier, I extracted it out so that it's easier to maintain, modify, update, etc., etc. So for example, I'm going to want to add ratings inside of it, so I'll probably pull out like a rating display, and then I'll inject that into the, check this out. So we'll be able to inject that inside of this little drop-down expansion thing, right? So each one of these rows is its own self-contained thing. All right, let's go back here. So let's go check this out. Let's find a row, right? So row, it needs a key that's unique. The ID that came from the database, that's unique, and I actually kind of need that everywhere anyway. So then for the row, I pass it the row as a row, its data. It's actually a full-blown facility, so a facility object, which is, I defined it in the ASP.NET backend, and it's just some JSON with some properties. You know, it's got a name, a description. What has it got? It's got all the stuff in here, right? Name, longitude, latitude, description, address line 1, address line 2, city, state, zip, country. That's it. Has those. Check out a row. So a row actually has a lot in it, and it's more complex HTML. So you'll see here, actually, there's two buttons. There's an edit and a delete. So we're getting the modals again. So this is the concept of I want to separate my modals from my buttons, because right now they're here, but I might have other places I want to edit one. So again, when I add the map, I want to have a geo drop point on the map. I want to hit edit on that, which is going to be a little icon. I don't want to have to tie it up to the same button. So I can add other things that can render it. The downside is that you end up with something along these lines where now I have, you know, these four. So this one is for the delete. Or no, this one is for whether it's expanded or not expanded. This one is for whether the edit is open, and this one is for whether the delete is open. And now I need to define a bunch of handlers for each one of them. This was kind of neat. For the delete confirm handler, the logic was more complicated than just repassing the reload. So I need it to actually close as well. So you'll see that I have a set delete modal to false and a reload. So this is information that I need to pass to the delete modal itself as logic, because when we go to the delete modal, this confirm, that logic is what's going to this button, right? I hit that confirm, and it's going to do the delete and then close the modal, right? And it could, you know, if I want to add a toast notification, that's where the toast notification logic goes as well. So if I wanted to add a toast, I would set the delete modal to false, I would do a reload, and I would put the toast up. In fact, I should do all this inside this response OK. Anyways, so moving down, we've got a lot of fancy row stuff, and you'll see that we're data binding to the row.name, row.city, row.state, ratings count. This has to line up with the same stuff that's in the table. So if I add a new cell here, I need to add a new cell to the top level table so that everything lines up nice and neat. And then here we go. We've got the button, and this is handling the delete. So this one is a delete button, and this is the modal. So you'll see we're using this generic confirmation modal, and we're passing it the open delete modal. What was this? Go to definition. Aha. So we're passing it whether it needs to be open or not. Right, same thing same pattern. So remember in my advice, I was saying, hey, what you need to do is refactor 3 to 4 times, establish your pattern. Maybe not the best pattern, it's a pattern. I kind of like it, so we're going to go with that pattern for now. If y'all got a better pattern, I mean, this is called learn ReactJS with me, not I know everything. So It'd be great if I knew everything. If y'all figure that out, let me know. Cool, so that confirmation modal. And then we go up, edit facility modal, same kind of thing. We're going to pass it the open, what it needs to do on a handle close, what it needs to do on a handle submit. What do you need to do on a confirm? What do you need to do on a cancel? And last but not least, let's take a look at our generic confirmation modal, just to have gone all the way down to the depths through the entire hierarchy. So we started at the top level, and we're going to go all the way down to a confirmation modal. So it's a dialog, so that's a modal, right? And I took in whether it's open or close as a property from the top level, right? We're managing the state from the component that wraps up that thing. So if the page wraps up the modal and whether it should be open or closed, the page is what's controlling the state, and we're isolating the button from it. So the page controls what's rendered, it controls what is open. Also, on close, I'm taking that in. What should I do on a close? Do I simply just close? Maybe some instances you want it to close, but some instances you don't want it to close, right? You want it to do more things like a delete of something or a toast of something, or are you sure? Did you mean to do that? Tooltip, blah, 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 hook here, etc. Want to make it generic, so give it the title, give it the description. What do you do on a confirm? What do you do on a cancel? So what we're really doing here, this seems silly sometimes to wrap all this up, but this is 14 lines of code. We're removing boilerplate here. So this one's just ditching more boilerplate so that when I actually go and use this like we were from the row confirmation modal, instead of 14 lines of code, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. So I've ditched a bunch of boilerplate, and I don't have to type that same boilerplate all the time. And if I need to make a modification or I wanted to do something fancier, right, like maybe I want a cool animation with it, I have one place to do that from here on out. I don't have 50 places to do it. That's why people like React, that right there. So that's about it for my plan on React for today. Hopefully y'all like that. If there's any requests, I'm basically just going to do kind of things I've been learning over the past couple weeks, and we'll continue to go from there. So thank y'all, and hopefully we'll see you soon.